Our next speaker this morning is a 45-year Toastmaster and frequent visitor to our club, distinguished Toastmaster Karl Ryder. He is a member of the Winter Park Toastmasters and the Orlando Toastmasters Club 1066. Karl has been trying to see into the future. He had an appointment with the Cassadaga psychic until he saw an article in the Sentinel that said the psychic had been arrested for income tax evasion. Carl decided that if the psychic didn't see that coming, she would be no help to him. Now he has a better way to see the future. Karl's speech this morning is entitled 2020 Foresight. Please welcome Karl Ryder, DTM.
How many of you have seen the TV program called Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? I've got a better idea for a TV show. Are you smarter than a squirrel? Don't laugh. There are some neighbors in my neighborhood who aren't. The squirrel I'm talking about is apparently noted that many of his fellow squirrels have become roadkill trying to cross my street, Hathaway Drive. So this squirrel has figured out a safer way to cross the road. He climbs up the telephone pole on my side of the street, walks across the wires, and goes down on the other side. And I've seen him do this for several months now. Now contrast that with some of my neighbors who seem to have a death wish. My neighbor Chris, for example, drives without wearing a seatbelt. And I rode with him one day. I said, Chris, why don't you wear a seatbelt? He said, well, if I get in a wreck, I want to be thrown clear. I'm thinking, thrown clear, all right, into what, oncoming traffic maybe? Or a tree at 60 miles an hour? I said, even if you don't get killed, you're going to get a ticket for leaving the scene of an accident. Then there's my neighbor across the street, Ted, who rides a motorcycle without a helmet. Crazy, based on what we've read about the injuries, the severe injuries that you get when you fall off your motorcycle at 60 miles an hour. I said to Ted, why don't you just wear a t-shirt that says organ donor, and that would take care of that. But the strangest one is this lady who's been jogging through my neighborhood now for about 10 years, and she's still alive. And I say that because she runs with traffic, right side of the road, unaware of what's coming up behind her. And that could be what, a drunk driver who's starting to drift off the road, or a sleep-deprived member of Toastmasters who's been up late practicing a speech. She's never going to see it coming. Roadkill. We all know that we're supposed to face traffic, because if that car starts to drift off the road into your shoulder area, you can see it coming and you can step aside. Now, this is what happened to Stephen King, the author, who was hit from behind while he was out walking one morning, and he almost was killed. Months later, after he finally recovered, he told a reporter, you know, in hindsight, I should have been on the other side of the road. There's that word, hindsight, that's so prevalent in our lives. We're always saying that, aren't we? In hindsight, I should have done this, I should have done that. If I could go back, I would have had better lawyers. I wouldn't have bought that timeshare property in Chernobyl. Things like that. We say that all the time. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. I was reminded of how prevalent hindsight is in our life on a Friday when I went to lunch with some friends. Some of the Toastmasters of the Winter Park Club eat lunch on Fridays at a sports bar on Fairbanks. And when the weather's nice, we sit outside. Well, I got there late a few months ago, and the guys were sitting out on the deck. So I went over to the table, and I noticed that one of the Toastmasters, Roy, was sitting on a newspaper, presumably because the chair was wet. So I decided to have a little fun with Roy. I said, Roy, are you reading that newspaper? He looked at me kind of oddly, and then he stood up, turned the page, and sat back down. He said, why, yes, I am. I said, you see, I have hindsight. Well, what if we could get rid of hindsight in our lives and be more proactive to see the roadblocks and the setbacks before they sabotage us? What I'm talking about is a concept that I've thought about many times called 2020 Foresight, and it's the subject of a book that I'm writing. What is foresight, 2020 Foresight? Well, we've all heard of defensive driving, haven't we? You're driving a car, you're supposedly looking way ahead to foresee problems before they become collisions. That's called defensive driving. Well, I think that we can practice defensive living. We can be more proactive and see problems before they become real setbacks in our lives. So 2020 vision then is a form of seeing ahead, looking into the future. I'll give you some of the examples of how it works, because I think that not only should we consider using this, but I think it's absolutely imperative that we have 2020 foresight in our lives if we're going to have control of our lives and not take circuitous routes to our goals. I'll give you some examples of how you can implement this. How often have you gone to the airport to meet a relative or a friend and found out that the flight was delayed by several hours? So now you're sitting there in the airport angry, wasting your time watching other people be angry, when you could have simply picked up the phone and called the airline to see if it was on time. I do that now. And this past summer, when my brother came to visit me a year ago, the flight was in fact delayed from Dallas because of weather. So rather than sit at an airport doing nothing, I made use of that 2 hours at home before I headed out. How often have you gone to a restaurant and found out there's an hour and a half wait? Simple phone call would have prevented that. Have you ever packed for a trip and gotten there and you're getting dressed for a function and you found out you didn't bring a belt, or you forgot the tie, or maybe you didn't bring the cufflinks? If you practice 2020 foresight, you will mentally dress yourself for each of the events that you have to attend while you're at that convention. So you're visually putting your belt on, you're visually tying your tie and putting your cufflinks on. Now you know that they're in the suitcase. These are just simple techniques that you can use to simplify your life and avoid all of these problems that we have. Vision is one of the great leadership qualities that we should all have as managers or leaders. In 1971, when Disney World opened, Roy Disney, the nephew of Walt Disney, was asked by a reporter, "Isn't it a shame that Walt isn't here today to see all of this?" And Roy said, he did see it, that's why it's here. You see, vision is a leadership quality that we should all practice. So not only is it good for you in your personal lives, it can help you in business as well. Are you smarter than a 5th grader? Are you even smarter than a squirrel? If you are, you'll start practicing 2020 foresight. Fantastic.